Hi, everybody. Welcome and thank you for being with us this evening. We're going to show you Midnight Sky, the cast and crew, and we're all here and we're all very proud of it. And we're happy to be able to share it with you. If you stay tuned afterwards, I get the very great pleasure of sitting down with Cate Blanchett and talking about the film. I'm not really sitting down with her. She's in London and I'm in LA. And so, you know, like this year, it's all a little nutty, but hope you enjoy the film.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cate, and I hope that you all enjoyed the film as much as I did. And I'm very excited to introduce our special guest that probably very few of you will know. Is an actor who hasn't worked quite a number of years. He's I think he's got early onset dementia. He's an artist formerly known as George Clooney, who is the director, producer, and star of Midnight Sky. George, are you there? Hola.
Hola, Cate.
Bravo.
Well, thanks for doing this. It's good to see you. Where are you?
I'm in London. You look like you're about to do some vaudeville.
I am. I'm going to do. Actually, it's a puppet show that we do here.
Puppet show, great. Well, you need to.
I've got a 3-year-old. You know, nothing I do is interesting anymore. Are you in London?
I am. And you're in Los Angeles. Has it kind of broken off from the rest of the States yet?
It's trying. We're doing our best. We had a little earthquake a couple of months ago. We're almost there.
Yeah.
And then we'll just paddle to Hawaii.
Good work. Or onto Australia. I hear they're making movies there at the moment.
Oh, they are? They're working there. Well,
they are.
They're not.
Look, I absolutely love this film. I was so ambushed by it. I watched it with 3 generations because my mother has moved in with us.
Right.
The joy, an actual joy.
Yeah.
And I watched it with my 2 of my sons and my grandmother, my husband. And it was just so, I found it, for a film that's so moving, and, you know, obviously as a parent, and we can talk about that later, and just watching the reactions of everybody and being on this raft together, I found it so psychologically rich, but so emotional. But I am actually going to start with a really shallow question. The beard.
Did you like it?
Oh, it was magnificent.
It was on, I got it on rent from David Letterman. And, yeah, I had to give it back. You know, that was a whole summer growing that thing, and my kids loved it because, you know, whenever they wanted my attention, they would literally grab it and yank my head around and yank my head back. But yeah, it took a little while to grow it out, and then
How
shape
long did it take you to grow out?
It took 4 months. Yeah.
And then a nanosecond to shave off.
Oh, and the funniest thing, you know, I shot everything and I was editing while I would shoot because I was, even then, this is before pre-pandemic, but I was fairly sure we weren't going to get a chance to come back and reshoot stuff. So I wanted to make sure I had everything all along. So the day I finished, which was for the Christmas vacation we started in October, we shot all my stuff first. So the day we finished, I went in and I shaved the whole thing off. No chance of a reshoot. No, I was like, get this thing off of me, because it had begun to have a life of its own, and it was the
There's
least.
a lot of critters in there.
There was all kinds of there was some of my children left their toys there, you know. That kind of thing.
I remember I was in a production of Uncle Vanya with Hugo Weaving, who was also, I mean, he's your rival in the most hirsute man on screen. And I fell so in love, he played Astrop, I fell so in love with his beard that we had, after the 3rd tour of the play, we had a ritual shaving. It was all, we were all clothed, it was, you know, it was PG shaving. Sure. And I said, I just want to keep the beard. And then we moved house and I put it in this little Ziploc bag. But I was so upset. I moved house and I unpacked everything. Oh, Hugo's beard's here somewhere. And it shrinks.
Your beard shrinks, yes.
It turns to dust. Did you keep?
I gave it to the makeup and hair department, and I shaved it off so that it all stayed in one piece, and then I put it on some stickum so it would stay there in case for some reason there was a reason to go back. I didn't want to have to do one of those bad fake pirate beards. But I kept the one from Syriana in a thing for a while, and it literally turns to, it becomes one of the, you know, funkiest things your housekeeper could ever find.
But it shrinks. I'm sure your other ones shrunk as well. There's funny that you mentioned that, because there's kind of a strange parallel between the roles. They're like distant, non-kissing cousins, you know. And I thought about you being just slightly older from when you did Syriana. I mean, they're both isolated and remote, and you know, having this really strong desire to connect. But this character that you created in Augustine, there's something so obviously physically fragile about him, but there's not a skerrick of the curmudgeon in him.
Yeah. Well, you know, you have an advantage. When I did ER, I played a pediatrician on the show. And so I worked with, you know, just hundreds of kid actors, you know, so I sort of had some understanding of it. But on the show, I was like a womanizer and a drunk and all these things. And I could do all of those things. I didn't have to sort of wink that I was a good guy, because I would always, at the end of the day, save the kid, you know? And so people would go, he's a good guy. So you could get away with kind of anything. So when I read the script, I thought, you know, the fun part about this part is that you don't have to sort of make him in any way likable necessarily. You don't have to, you can be sort of really ticked off about the situation, and or you know, or lost without having to bring in any of that energy, because all along you're also protecting this young girl, Kaylin.
I know. I think it's part of. I mean, I found it moving on a lot of levels, but I think part of it is, you know, in the apocalyptic sort of genre that this, you know, that we know and love, particularly now in the pandemic, you know, films that make you,
everything's apocalyptic now, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I know. It's so possible. We're in it. We don't have to imagine what that would be. I mean, 2049 is the predictions, the scientific predictions of where we're going to be. It's a documentary.
It is. It started out as when we first started, you know, I talked to Netflix, and I said, look, I think we have to talk about the idea that in the world, as we see all of this anger and hatred, not just in the United States, but, you know, this divisiveness all around the world. In England, you have it, and certainly in you know, go down the list, you know. And I said, if you play this out, it's not inconceivable. It's not a science fiction that we can, you know, destroy ourselves by 2049. That's not an inconceivable thing at all, you know. And so that was sort of my pitch. And then the pandemic hit after we wrapped, and it sort of changed exactly what we were, you know, in a way. Then it became much more about our inability to communicate, our inability to touch and to be near one another, and that loss. And it's funny how real that became, and how we suddenly understand this lack of being near one another, you know, and our need to do that, you know.
I know. I think that's part of what I found really moving about it, was that it's in the DNA of the story, is that it's that selfless act. Because I think that that's what the pandemic's revealing to all of us, is that, you know, you see the best and worst of us, and that's in a way what the film really, I think it's what makes the film so strong, is that it doesn't focus on the apocalypse itself. Like we're living it. We're on a surfboard, you know, riding that tsunami right now. But so what it deals on is it deals with the kind of the desire to. There's no hope in it, but yet it's a really strangely hopeful. Well, you know, because of that act of selflessness.
Well, there is an act that, you know, the idea was, you know, if you stopped it just before the end, you know, it's a film about regret. Right. If you stop it before you end at the very end, it's about not fulfilling your life. And I do believe that in general, probably one of the worst things that could happen, I've seen it with older people who have not fulfilled, never tried to do the things that they thought they could have done, and are filled with regret. And aging is a very difficult thing for them because they didn't do it. Regret's a very powerful, infuriating element. But to me, this one was all about redemption, and there is redemption in this, and that redemption washes over us, you know. But, you know, by the end, when you find out, now that, since everybody here has seen it, we don't have to worry about spoilers. When you find out that I'm not just trying to save mankind by I'm trying to save my daughter, who I never showed up for. And there's something very, you know, it's important to always personalized stories. You know, we when I would you go to Darfur and you talk about 300,000 people are dead. Well, that's a number and people can't consume it.
Yeah.
But if you talk about one person and you show their struggle, it's much different. And so it's much more about sort of isolating this into a smaller story in a big landscape, which it was a big landscape, Iceland and space. You know, it doesn't get bigger.
Well, I know. I mean, the locations must have been. I mean, Iceland is an extraordinary country. It makes you believe in fairies. Although you were in wintertime. I went in summer once, and it was. I think that I had a high of 14 degrees Celsius. It's a.
We were there.
You were there in winter.
But we first went. We scouted in the summer, and it was like you said, it was beautiful. We took the snowmobiles out onto the glacier, and it was stunning. But we got there in mid-October, and it'll wake you up a little bit. Then it was. We'd have gusts of about 70 miles an hour, which would get to like 40 degrees below zero, and it was. You know, it was properly cold, which is helpful actually as an actor, because you know elements actually help us. As a director, it's a mother to do, because it's like you know, we had a pretty reduced crew, but it'd be completely clear. You could see 1,000 miles. It's gorgeous. And we'd wait for the wind gusts to come, and you could see these walls of snow coming in, and we all go like, all right, everybody get ready. And then, you know, and we were all tied to each other. We had strings. So, because you could get lost, you can't see your hand in front of your face, and and the camera guy's holding the camera, and you're just trying to get, you know, a minute, good luck, 30 seconds of a shot inside this, you know, and then after about 30 seconds, like 45 seconds or so, my eyelids would freeze shut, and we'd have to go in with a blow dryer and blow my eyelashes apart so I could go back out and shoot. It was just...
Yeah, I mean, the light was extraordinary. There's a couple of shots that have really burned into my retina. The cinematography was so beautiful. And so when you were flipping between these two realities, it had a sort of a... Part of it was really dreamlike. You know, when you're in those environments and you do get turned around, you don't know what's up and what's down, or what's a reflection. And there was a shot of Augustine and Iris, and it was really painterly. That part of me at times in a bit way, in sort of similar to Solaris in a way, is I thought, is this a dream? Is this actually happening? You know, in the way that when you are in a traumatic situation, you lose touch with reality.
We, you know, from the very beginning, I talked with the composer, with Alexander Desplat, who's just and a dear friend. And I said, you're going to write more music than you've ever written for a movie. And he's like, I am? And I was like, you are. And then I said, you know, this is going to be, we've taken out a lot of dialogue, because the truth is, you know, for me, my character, if the little girl isn't going to talk, what am I going to say? You know, there isn't going to be as much dialogue. So we're going to have to tell the story with music, which makes it feel more dreamlike and feels more, it gives it, you know. And then I said, okay, so we're going to have this scene with this blood. And I said, but the blood is going to be moving like a ballet. The blood itself floating is going to be like a ballet. And, you know, he can't see it because we haven't done the effects yet while he's writing the music. And he's like, a ballet of blood? And I go, a ballet of blood. And he goes, okay. And he wrote this extraordinary piece of music. And so I relied a lot on the storytelling on this one, on the music sort of taking over. And in a way to, you know, it's a meditation, this film. It's not you know, there are a couple of set pieces that have action in them. But in general, it's, you know, it's a meditation on what we're capable of doing to one another, you know, and also, you know, the good in us, you know, fight to survive that we still have.
And that was so profoundly sad, you know, her death with the blood. You sort of knew something was bound to happen. And I kept thinking, please God, please let it not be Sully's child. I just don't think I could have borne that. But it was so interesting watching that blood sort of almost pixelate out of the body, that we returned to sort of atoms. It was really profound.
It was interesting. The original script was that Maya, Tiffany's character, runs out of air. But since that's happened, gravity, we did it. And, you know, that happened to Sandy in the film. So we're like, well, we can't do that. So I was watching all of these films of all these astronauts up in the air, and they would do this thing where they would squirt out a drink and it would just float in bubbles, and then they would drink it, out of these bubbles. And I just said, well, what if she just, what if she bleeds out? What if we have blood going out? And the minute I said that to the effects guys, they're like, ooh, wow, that's crazy. And, and they really embraced the idea of, I didn't want it to be gruesome in a weird way. It is, terrifying, but it's, there's something sort of poetic about it, at least, that it's sort of that we follow this blood all the way out as we leave the chamber and stuff. So,
but also, and I don't know whether this is your experience of childbirth, not your experience as a witness, but there was something so beautiful about Felicity's character saying, "Look at me, stay with me," almost like a doula,
yeah.
Carrying her out as she was going to bring a child in. But I wondered, because you're just talking about Iceland, and I mean, there's a couple of ways you could have gone with this. You could have really just said, no, it's too crazy to shoot on the top of Snuffleupagus or whatever glacier you were on in Iceland. We're going to do a lot of it with visual effects. But it seemed, I mean, I suppose how much was in camera, and how much, when did you make that decision? How early on did you make that decision?
Right away. The first thing you have to do when you're going to go out there, we have a couple of things working against us, besides the weather that you're just at the mercy. But one is that we're shooting in late October, so we only have about, light comes up at 11:30, goes down at about 3:30, and you also have a little girl who's 7 who has an hour, a particular time, Kaylin. She has a particular amount of time that she can shoot in, and so I boarded everything. I was really ready for it, and we had a really small crew. We'd grab camera boxes and run out into a spot. But there's a lot of other tricks to it. You can't just run and do something because, it's got this covering of snow over what could be a 200-foot drop in the middle, as you've probably been out there on those things. There are very specific places you can go. And we go, well, I'd like to shoot up there because the light is great. And we see that. We'd kind of walk with them. The guys would go, no, don't go through that. And they, show you that could drop for, So there was, it wasn't as, it really had to be planned out. We really, and then we relied on the wind, because the wind did everything for us. The wind gave us the snow, because it really wasn't a snowstorm. It's just wind blowing the snow that made it, that blocked out everything and made it all white. And so you would wait for it. At the times we had ritters out there in the middle of, nowhere. It's like, that's going to help, and we ended up having to fill in about 6 or 7 shots on a stage, and digitally fill it in a couple of shots we didn't get, but you can't tell which ones they are. And that was it was a lot of help with the effects guys to make sure. There was a couple of shots we couldn't get. We just didn't, we ran out of time and ran out of wind.
Please tell me, after your terrifying injury on Syriana, that you didn't butch it out and jump into some.
No, I'm not.
Please tell me it was a tank.
Listen, it was a tank. And by the way, I'll be 60 this year, and butching it out is not, what I do anymore. I sort of, I very quietly, I whine it out mostly.
It was, did Mark's script come to you, or did you option the book? What was it?
No,
what drew you to the story?
So Mark wrote the screenplay for Netflix, and they sent it to me to act in it. And I loved the part. I thought, this is a really good part. And then they didn't have a director attached. And I said, look, I think I have a take on this. I've done a couple of space films, with a couple of maestros, with Alfonso and Steven Soderbergh. And I said, I think I know what this story is. There was a movie long ago, and we put a little clip of it in our movie with Gregory Peck, called On the Beach. Yeah. And I thought that this was sort of a modern telling of On the Beach, which was on the beach, there'd been the nuclear exchange, because at the time we were all only dealing with the idea of the end of mankind from a nuclear exchange. And everyone had died except Australia. And everybody ends up in Australia, and the nuclear cloud is coming, so they're going to die, and so it's coming to terms with the end of the world and your own death, and it's pretty nihilistic, and everybody dies at the end, and so it doesn't have sort of the same ability for some hope, but it had a lot of those elements of coming to terms with what we've done and what we're capable of doing, and finding kindness and compassion and love in acts of kindness. I thought that Kyle and Demian's characters, when originally they were written much younger, and I just said let's get older guys. Older guys has a little more heft to it, and I said to them, I want you to be the old men in the Muppets in the balcony. I want them to have fun and really have some experience and know each other, so that when things go wrong, there's an understanding between them. When Demian says, I'd like to take a ride home with my buddy, it has a real emotional moment to it, and it's about love and caring and understanding that they're probably not going to make it. And then the other element that sort of came into this was magical, was Felicity calling me and saying she was pregnant.
I know. I find that so remarkable, because we're at that moment when after that extraordinary shot of her out on whatever planet she was on, and that incredible orange, which felt so possible, it was so beautiful. And then she wakes up and you think, wow, that is an extraordinary appliance. No, I think she's got the walk down. She's waddling. She's really pregnant. Yeah. So that wasn't in the book. That wasn't in this. That wasn't
in the script. It wasn't in the shoot. I was in Iceland shooting, and Felicity, who's probably here because it's a premiere, Felicity called me and said, I have some news. She didn't say good news or bad news. She just had news. And she said, I'm pregnant. And, there was not even a pause, because I'm not dumb. I immediately said, congratulations. That is so exciting for you. We're all very excited for you. And then there was a long pause, and it's like, so what do you want to do? And she says, I can do it. I can go on the wires. I've talked to the stunt guy. I'm ready to do it. And I'm like, we're not going to put you on the wires. I mean, we're not going to do that. Let's figure it out. So our first step was we tried to shoot it without acknowledging it. We tried to do head replacements and shoot around it, and and all of that. We did that for a couple of days, and I don't know if you've ever done those kind of shoots, but they really do take the energy out of the room and take the energy out of the actors. And she was trying desperately not to look pregnant, and all of it just felt like
your breath.
Hold your breath, stuck in your gut. And she was visibly pregnant, and so I woke up in the middle of the night and I just said, you know what, they go away for 2 years, people have sex, so she got pregnant. And once we decided that she was pregnant and leaned into it and said, okay, well, if she's pregnant, then we can have the guys trying to name her. We can build this we built this ultrasound machine in a day. It was I can't remember what it was, but went to Jim Bissell, the production designer. I said, I need something that we could fake as an ultrasound machine, and we quickly put together a scene for her and for she and Tiffany to do this sort of beautiful scene where she holds her hand. And the reason we loved that scene suddenly was because they're listening for anything, any sign of life. That's all they're waiting for, is any sign of life. And finally, the only sign of life they have is from Felicity. And it just felt sort of beautiful. And it led to the ending, which now feels like it should have always been there, which is.
So was that ending, before, because this is a remarkable thing about this, embracing this, what became an extraordinary opportunity, is it just, I cannot imagine the film without
that. I can't either now.
It just gave profound resonance to what was going on between you, your character, and Iris, and on Earth. But it also gave a real weight to that final image. Was that final image of that kind of deliberate banality? And I found it heartbreaking, having been married for 23 years, to the person who I madly love, is that you do live in parallel sometimes, even though if you look back on it, you think, why didn't I save at that moment?
Yeah.
And even after all they've been through, he goes down, she goes up, life goes on, and
we always wanted it. It was funny. Originally, imagine this. So without her being pregnant, when he says, it looks like it's just us now, the look is, it's sort of like the end of, it's like the end of The Graduate, you know, where they're like going, at the end, they sit in the back of the bus and they're like, you know, well, what have we done? And so before, they weren't necessarily romantically linked. They would flirt a little bit, but they weren't romantically linked. So when you say it looks like it's just us now, there's that look of like, oh, now we have to have sex and now we have to have children and we have to, you know, keep. But instead, now that's all out the window. You don't have to worry about that. And what you do is you suddenly go, now this is something we have to protect. And really fascinating about it as actors, as a crew, once, you know, Felicity was there and was pregnant, suddenly became a really important part of our lives. Like everyone, the crew and the cast and everyone was defensive and protective and looking out for, and it really joined us all together. It ended up filling this kind of hole that we didn't know was there. And once it happened, you know, it's the trick. And you know this, you've done, you know, when you improvise things, you have to say, you can't say no, because it stops the improvisation. You know, if you say, well, that wall is blue, and you go, no, it's red, done. You can't go anywhere. So it's yes, and yes, it's blue, and there's a dinosaur. You have to continually add on. You can't deny things. So once we decided that she was, that we're just going to accept the fact that she's pregnant and not hide it, it just gave us the opportunity to open up in so many different ways that once you're open to it, we're limitless. And so everything felt like, oh, this is going to actually make the film better. And
they're extraordinary. They're an extraordinary team, like a really, really unusual energies. Normally when you get a spacecraft full of astronauts, you've got archetypes, whereas I felt that none of them were, they're kind of new versions of astronauts.
Yeah.
You know, like it wasn't even pointing to Star Trek. It just, they had really interesting energies, as unusual energies as actors. Well, the dynamic was really particular.
It was also important for us that they had humor. You know, when we did ER, again, I go back to that because it was a very serious hospital show, but there was really dark sort of gallows humor. And it was always important that this gang, you know, gave each other shit along the way and had fun with each other. And, you know, them all singing Sweet Caroline and Tiffany not knowing the song, you know, you just want, now, of course, anybody who watches film knows that, oh, something bad's about to happen. We kind of gather that, but, you know, it gave us the opportunity to have the guys in the, you know, back on the spaceship, back on Ether, you know, really embracing the song. And as Kyle and Demian did, and Demian really went, I mean, he loved it. He went a madman. Kyle doesn't like to sing, so you'll notice that he just kind of fills in lines every once in a while he'll say something, but he doesn't really sing.
It's all earache.
He got all nervous about singing, I think.
We're telling me I've got 1 minute left, so I have to ask you about casting. Where did you find that extraordinary child with those extraordinary eyes? I mean,
we read.
Absolutely. How old is she?
She's 7. She was 7 when we shot it. She's 14 now. I don't know how that happened. She was, you know, we read literally a couple hundred girls, and they were all great, and they all had something really unique. But Kaylin showed up. And first of all, yes, she has these extraordinary eyes. That's just magical. So I would say, okay, you're running away from me as the ice is breaking, and turn around and give me your scared face. And she would do this thing, which is hard to do for any actor. And she would nail it. And I'm not kidding at all when I tell you that Kaylin, at least 50%, probably more, of everything I did with her was one take. You know, literally one take. And we didn't have the ability. She probably saved us 5 days of shooting on the schedule because we'd scheduled for, you know, there to be tricks with having to use someone younger and stuff. She put all of us, the rest of us, David and I would look over at at her at times I'd be talking and say, she's putting us to shame. Because she really did. She was like, it all just came so naturally. There's a scene where we're just sitting in the chairs looking up at Polaris. And it's just supposed to be a really quiet moment. And quiet moments are hard to fill with a kid because they're trying to fill it, She just sat there and I said, look, that's Polaris. She looks up at it and then she looks, I said, you see it? She looks up and then she looks over and she goes, and she nods her head. And you think, man, that's that's great acting. And it's just, so we were really lucky that we found her along the way because
there were so many beautiful moments, with the peas and the, having to sleep in the same room, and you could tell that you'd lived that experience.
Well, yeah. And I love when we were out in the ice, we saw this beautiful shot. We saw this beautiful frame where the wind was blowing over the top of this ice and it was sort of backlit and it was just stunning. And I go, let's go dig a hole over there and get inside the thing and, pull her down in it. And she's in there just digging away, at the snow, trying to do it. And, she was, she's a little Irish girl. She's tough. She's out in very, very cold, hard winds and she could hang. It was, but everybody to a T, I know we have to finish up. Everybody to a T came to this with exactly the right attitude, which is that, we're all in this together and we're gonna work it out. Everybody had great ideas that made the film better, which is always nice. The people who were involved, from cinematography to production design, everybody, I just said, give me your best. And they did. The visual effects guys were doing stuff they'd never done before. And the space stuff, the space stuff was interesting because I looked at all these space films and Alfonso arguably did the best sort of physical version of that with Gravity, in terms of, going outside. So when we were out of Gravity, I kept saying, why is that so good? And it was because Alfonso, there is no north or south in space because there is no north or south. You're constantly moving. So the idea was to keep the camera rotating like he did, but not so much that you make everybody throw up, which is it is a trick, and so you're constantly battling these demons along the way. But everybody came into it. Martin, the cinematographer, really had a beautiful plan, and we worked on it for a long time. And I have to say, it was nothing but a pleasure to do. It was fun, except for the beer.
It was a real pleasure to watch. A real pleasure to watch. For a film about the apocalypse, it's really uplifting and very funny.
Exactly. A lot. It's a big comedy. You watch it with
laugh a minute.
You watch it with your in-laws,
But it was really beautiful. And as I said, like all three generations in my household loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Okay.
Congratulations.
I have to say thank you for coming out and doing this very unusual thing, which is, first of all, we don't do interviews. You don't interview people. And so thank you for doing this, number one. And number two, it's an odd way of living our lives right now, but this is going to get better. And there is some light at the end of the tunnel. And hopefully we will all be in the same room soon and have a drink and catch up.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm watching this, it really makes you think about time left and, and the desire to connect, which is, of course, what everyone's thinking.
Yeah, that's the truth. Thanks. Thank you.
Congratulations.
You too. Thank you.